Well, as spring breathes new life into Beijing, many areas across the city are teeming with migratory birds. Meet Paul Holt, a British birdwatching expert who's turning weekend strolls into urban safaris for nature lovers of all ages. And Guo Linjian has the story for us.
Two majestic black swans glide across tranquil waters. A pair of emerald-headed ducks dart through reeds. A siege of gray herons soars overhead. Through binoculars, a hidden avian world comes alive. Once the Qing dynasty's imperial hunting grounds, southern Beijing's Nanhaizi has transformed into a vital sanctuary for migratory birds crossing continents.
Towards the left-hand end of the island, there are many. Oh, lots of vinous-throated parrotbills. You see the flock of birds going onto the island?
Leading a diverse group of enthusiasts through this urban oasis is British bird-watching expert Paul Holt, on a mission to decode the secrets of Beijing's skies. Though bird-watching is booming across China, many still underestimate Beijing's avian diversity. Paul begs to differ.
Over the years, I've had many Chinese people come up to me and they say, "Oh, why do you birdwatch in China? There are no birds in China." And that is just so wrong. Beijing, huge city, 25 million people perhaps, but so many birds, big migration, huge variety of species, and it's fabulous. I love the birdwatching in China, and I really enjoy sharing my enthusiasm for birdwatching in China with Chinese people.
Paul's troop is no casual flock. 11-year-old Yiling wields a camera lens longer than his arm, while twin sisters Crystal and Melody, barely taller than their binoculars, are 3-year veterans.
When I press the shutter, the moment is so thrilling. I suppose that's the dopamine rush people talk about.
We watch a lot of good birds today, and I think the favorite bird I have is here, the kingfisher. This kingfisher is catching a fish and is eating it.
You see, it has some green and blue feathers on its back, and it also has some red feathers. So I think it's a very beautiful bird.
Yeah. When you are in the nature and you are with the birds, you will feel very relaxed looking at the trees, feeling the fresh air. Hearing the birds sing, we can load off our stress. I think it's a very good experience for me.
They're part of a national movement. A 2023 government report revealed that China's bird-watching community skyrocketed 142% in 5 years, surpassing 340,000 enthusiasts.
This kind of experience is totally different from the work experience. I have to open my mind and open my sense, not only visually, but also acoustically. So that's, for me, it's very refreshing.
For Paul, the goal goes beyond spotting species. It's about nurturing tomorrow's conversationalists.
There are already quite a lot of bird photographers in Beijing and older people like myself that are bird watching. But the most important thing is to encourage young children and to make them proud of what they have. You only need a pair of binoculars and you can see birds, and there are birds everywhere.
Nowadays, children face a lot of academic pressure and intense competition. We encourage parents to take their kids outdoors and spend more time in nature. Bird watching from an early age is a wonderful way to help them appreciate the natural world.
This spring, adventure isn't just outside Beijing, it's overhead. All it takes is looking up. Guo Linjie, CGTN, Beijing.
Over 30,000 migratory birds from across the country are beginning their journey northward as spring arrives and temperatures rise. At Lianhua Lake National Wetland Park in northeast China's Liaoning, over 120 species of migratory birds have arrived as expected. Observations indicate nearly 600 oriental storks have gathered there, making it the largest recorded migratory population of the species in the province over the past 20 years. And further west along the Tarim River in Xinjiang, the popular forests have also welcomed a wave of returning migratory birds. Meanwhile, the Sugan Lake wetland in Jiuquan, Gansu also serves as a critical stopover for migratory birds. Whooper swans, bar-headed geese, and ruddy shed ducks, among other rare species, continue to arrive. All right, now we're joined by Paul Holt, a birdwatching expert from the UK who was just in that previous story. Great to have you with us on our program, Paul. So birdwatching has become increasingly popular, and thanks to people, enthusiasts like you, the popularity just continues to rise. Why do you think this is happening?
Oh, I think it's fabulous that it's happening, and it's just such an exciting hobby. You know, I'm obviously an enthusiast. I've been bird watching for a long time, but it's just a great hobby. And China's blessed with lots and lots of birds. Even big cities, even Beijing, where I live, even the urban parts, you can go out and you can see lots of birds very easily. And then some of the nature reserves that you've just mentioned, you go to special sites like that, and they've got even more birds. Yeah, we're blessed with huge numbers of birds, and it's just a great hobby, you know. It gets you out and about, it gets you in the countryside, in the fresh air, you get some exercise, and yet at the same time you get to practice your spotting and your hearing and your concentration skills. It's just a really good hobby, and it's so all-encompassing, you know. Old and young people can do it, men and women can do it, and it's an addictive hobby. It's a lot of fun.
You've seen the changes, Paul. I want to get your thoughts on the current status of bird conservation efforts in China, and of course the nation's achievements in this area, because before the population of birds and the diversity of the species came as a result of expanded forest areas perhaps, and the construction of nature reserves. Give us the comparison, the changes you've seen, please.
Oh yeah, there've been some vast changes, Mang Mang. Yeah, and I think China's done a pretty good job in wildlife and bird conservation. There's no gun ownership in China, which is a big thing, isn't it? There hasn't been gun ownership for a long time, and it's illegal to catch wild birds, and that's enforced. You know, the police are actively enforcing that. It's becoming very difficult, increasingly difficult now to buy mist nets, the fine filament nets that people use to illegally catch birds. And that's all being stopped, gradually worked on and stopped. And you have a huge variety of nature reserves in China. And your government's done a fabulous job at these. And city governments and national government, it's just great that you have so many places that save wildlife. But obviously, there's still, you can always say, you've done a great job, but there's still more to do, isn't there? There's a lot more that you can also do. Conservation's protecting birds is really all about protecting their habitat. Is a crucial thing, and China's had a big thing about increasing forest cover, which is superb. But not all birds like forest. You know, some birds like wetlands, some birds like rivers, some birds like coastal mudflats, and some of these habitats are still declining. And it's really crucial to protect a big variety of habitats, not just increase forest cover at the expense of other habitats. That's a little bit risky, a little bit long-term dangerous for birds and wildlife. And so,
sure.
The reforestation project.
It's fascinating to see how, you know, the birds, the avian population are enjoying their habitats here, and to see how people are reconnected with nature through bird watching. Thank you so much, Paul Holt. Well, in the spring, millions of migrating birds head north, traveling vast distances in search of food and nesting sites. Earlier, my colleague Sun Tianyuan visited a national wetland reserve in northeast China's Liaoning province to observe the annual arrival of birds in that region, including some of the world's most endangered species.
It's early spring in the northeastern city of Panjin. Tens of thousands of birds arrived from the south, right on schedule. The wetlands are home to over 300 mostly migratory bird species. Their chirping echoes across the reserve after a long and quiet winter.
我们经常讲的叫这个鸟类的驿站呢， The wetlands can provide proper environments for birds to inhabit, both migratory and resident species. We often refer to the wetlands as posts, gas stations, and sanctuaries for migratory birds. These are the places for them to rest, feed, and breed on their flyway.
Panjin is located along what's known as the East Asian Australasian Flyway, one of the world's busiest migration routes for birds. Staff at the reserve estimate that around 200,000 birds travel through the area every day in early March.
Records show there is an increase in bird species and numbers in certain areas in the Panjin wetlands due to the years of ecological restoration and protection efforts.
Lee says the reserve is also tasked with breeding red-crowned cranes in captivity, an endangered migratory bird species in China. Surprisingly, the cranes here are quite friendly. These long-billed fellas aren't scared of people at all. An expert at the breeding center tells me that these fellas grew up with humans. Before releasing them into the wild, trainers must help these cranes adapt to their new environment. The reserve has released 140 red-crowned cranes into the wild since 2021. Many of them joined the visiting wild cranes, leaving behind place they were raised in.
Kids will eventually grow up and live independently. It's like watching your kids go to college. I think all parents feel the same way, but it's a stage of life.
When the day comes, Papa Zhao has to say goodbye to his children. As more cranes leave the reserve, their human father hopes his children will return when spring comes around again next year. Sun Qianyuan, CGTN, Panjin, Liaoning Province.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of China 24. We're going to leave you now with some images of migratory birds enjoying the spring weather at the Ulungu Lake National Wetland Park in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. I'm Wang Mengmang. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for Global Business with Lincoln Humphreys.
Hello and welcome to China's weather forecast. Let's see what will happen in the near future. The cold air is expected to impact the northwest today and tomorrow, and then has eastward, targeting central and southern China starting Thursday. So when it comes to maximum temperature on Wednesday, we could see daytime highs in much of the north, forecast to be just in the single digits or lower teens. As we start Thursday, the daily highs in central eastern China will decline 10 to 18 degrees. That is to say, we will see daily highs going from 30s on Wednesday to only 20s on Thursday. Additionally, we should also notice sunny weather, for example, in places like Gansu, Ningxia, northern Shanxi, all the way to central Inner Mongolia on Wednesday, brought by cold air. As we get into Thursday, there could be a wide range of wet weather building up in central and southern China due to a collide between cold air and warm moisture. And our business and travel outlook on Thursday, we could notice 30 to 14 only in Nanchang, with mild rainfall building up and light rain or showers to be had in cities like Hefei, Nanjing, all the way to Shanghai on Thursday, with daily highs hovering around 20 degrees Celsius. Well, that's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.
Tonight on Global Business Future Focus, the Boao Forum for Asia kicks off in Hainan with discussions centred on economic integration of artificial intelligence and sustainable development. Consumption boost. China's Commerce Ministry announces new measures, including more tax-free shops and streamlined refunds to make shopping in China more convenient for foreign visitors. And troubled waters. A decades-old water-sharing treaty between the United States and Mexico becomes another point of contention. For the first time ever, the US has declined a request for water delivery. Welcome to Global Business. You're watching CGTN. I'm Lincoln Humphreys, coming to you live from Beijing. We'll start in southern China's Hainan province, where the Boao Forum for Asia annual conference has kicked off. Nearly 2,000 representatives from more than 60 countries and regions are attending the four-day event. Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang will deliver a keynote speech at the opening plenary on Thursday. The forum is seen as Asia's answer to Davos. This year's theme is Asia in the Changing World, towards a shared future. The theme reflects efforts in the region to boost multilateralism, promote openness and development, and jointly respond to global challenges. The flagship report on Asia's economic outlook projects the Asian economy to grow by 4.5% in 2025. The prediction is outlined in the annual report released at the Boao Forum for Asia today in Hainan. Chen Tong reports.
This is the most crowded news conference at every year's Boao Forum for Asia, the release of two flagship reports. The most important one on the Asian economic outlook predicts Asian GDP to grow by 4.5% in 2025, accounting for 36.4% of the global total. Two driving factors come from the digital economy and service trade. Retail e-commerce grew 8.4% in the Asia-Pacific region in 2024, and travel-related business has also seen an obvious recovery. All these figures are quite outstanding compared with global GDP growth of 3.2% in 2024, but experts are calling for further integration.
We have mechanisms like RCEP, Asia Economic Forum, ASEAN, and cooperation between China, Japan, and South Korea. But we could explore more. For example, the utilization of regional free trade agreements can be improved.
This 160-page annual report on Asian economic outlook was released every year at the Boao Forum for Asia. And the highlights of this year's report are signaling that Asia is playing a more critical role in the global stage amid economic uncertainties and trade frictions. Another report on sustainable development was also released, calling for further integration of carbon markets, nature-based solutions, and green technologies. Chen Tong, CGTN Boao, Hainan Province.
At the Boao Forum for Asia, CGTN reporter Dai Kai spoke to former Spanish Foreign Minister Arantxa González Laya about how China and the EU can work together in pursuit of more open trade, global stability, and action on climate change.
It's good to have you here on the show. As protectionism mindset threatens global prosperity, China remains a defender of open trade. So how can the EU and China work together to counter the challenges and ensure a fair and thriving global market?
Well, this is the time for China and the European Union to work together hand in hand. The two are large markets, the two are deep markets, and the two understand the value of open markets. So the two have today a responsibility to show there is another way. And maybe it's time that Europe and China find a functional agreement, essentially around three principles. One is to keep markets open to each other, obviously respecting the rules of the game, not weaponizing trade and investment against each other. Number two, agreeing to open each other's markets to each other's investments with rules of the game. China has been very good at setting those rules. Maybe Europe could follow that example too. And number three, working together hand in hand in the World Trade Organization to ensure there is a system of rules that guarantee openness, fairness, stability and predictability. This is what many countries around the world want, but they are looking for leadership. So I do hope that China and Europe working together can show that kind of leadership.
Climate change is a shared challenge that requires collective action. So how can the EU and China maybe better cooperate to combat this ongoing crisis effectively?
I would say the first thing they can do together is lend their support to the Paris Climate Agreement and helping other countries around the world that today don't have the capacity to adapt to climate change. Europe and China working together to help those countries access the necessary financing to adapt their agriculture, their cities, their infrastructure would be very, very welcome today.
China is promoting green cooperation in Kazakhstan, where Chinese electric vehicle makers are expanding and supporting the country's green transformation. Ajirim Kali reports from Astana.
So now I'm on one of the busiest streets of Kazakhstan's capital city, Astana. Here is located a new dealership of BYD brands, which sells new energy vehicles. Let's see what is inside. Demand drives supply. Kazakhstanis now have even more opportunities to switch to electric vehicles. At the start of the year, the market expanded with new models, including fully electric and hybrid cars. Residents of Astana are showing strong interest in electric vehicles, as they are not only convenient and eco-friendly, but also cost-effective.
I have waited a long time, and now I'm here for a test drive. I'm interested in electric cars, and based on the reviews, I'm most likely leaning toward one. However, if possible, I would prefer a hybrid model for long-distance travel.
To see if an electric car really is more comfortable and reliable, I decided to have a test drive myself. So the car drives easily and soft, very comfortable. So you see, I can easily change the speed. Yeah, it's very comfortable, and you see, it looks very luxurious inside.
The development of cars powered by new energy sources is the future. We began selling cars in Kazakhstan in January and have already seen strong demand and positive trends.
So now I came to electric charge station. So let's try to charge my electric car. Yeah, it's quite easy. And so we will keep this to charge the car. As you remember, it was only 55%. So very easy, and a lot of chargeable stations along Astana. There are currently more than 5 million cars in the Kazakhstan market, of which 12,000 have electric engines. As a percentage, this is a small share, less than 0.2%. However, interest in electric vehicles is growing every day.
The main advantage of a new electric car over older gasoline or diesel-powered cars is its greater benefit to the consumer. First, it offers fuel savings. Second, it is easy to use. Third, it is environmentally friendly.
With an electric car, you won't get lost anywhere, because you can charge even an electric kettle and have a very hot tea. Ajirim Kali, CGTN, Astana, Kazakhstan.
You're watching Global Business, and coming up next. Consumption boost. China's Commerce Ministry announces new measures, including more tax-free shops and streamlined refunds to make shopping in China more convenient for foreign visitors.
In uncertain times, it takes courage to build bridges, restore trust, and renew growth. The Boao Forum for Asia 2025. Here, leaders forge answers through multilateralism, innovation, and a refusal to let division define our age. Discover how China's growing opportunities fuel Asia's growth, and how Asia's rise powers global progress, unlocking a future of shared prosperity for all. join CGTN for special coverage of the Boao Forum for Asia.
China will increase the number of duty-free shops and streamline tax refund procedures for international visitors to stimulate consumer spending. At Tuesday's press conference, the Commerce Ministry announced new measures to combine tourism and retail development, aiming to unlock greater consumer potential. The plans include special promotions for green, smart and healthcare products to boost sales. Officials say China's social retail sales grew 4% year-on-year in January-February, signalling steady recovery in the consumer markets. Commerce Minister Wang Wentao has held meetings in Beijing with top executives of leading US companies, including Boeing, Qualcomm and Corning, to discuss their development plans in China. Yu Li reports.
The Chinese Minister of Commerce continued to meet with foreign enterprise representatives following the annual China Development Forum in Beijing.
I think you must have shared the same feeling that this was conducive to a sustained and stable China-US trade and economic relationship.
The president of Boeing Global, Brendan Nielsen, reconfirmed Boeing's commitment to China.
Boeing is very proud of its 53-year partnership with China. We are committed to China, we are committed to stay, and we are committed to grow.
It's so good to see you again.
Wendell Weeks, CEO of the American ceramics and glassmaking company Corning, also expressed a willingness to expand investment in China.
And we're looking to invest this year another at least $500 million.
Cristiano Amon, president and CEO of Qualcomm, was optimistic as well.
I feel that technology is providing a lot of opportunities for companies like Qualcomm and many of our partners in China, and more than ever, I am optimistic about the opportunity for mutual cooperation and development.
The conversations happened here in this meeting room. The message of the Minister of Commerce is clear. That is, economic and trade cooperation based on mutual benefits is in line with the interest of both China and the United States. Yu Li, CGTN, Beijing.
Another top executive, Apple CEO Tim Cook, is a familiar face at the China Development Forum in Beijing. Our reporter Yang Chengqi examines how key moments from his visit reflect major economic trends and China's role in the global industry and supply chains.
And that's Tim Cook. He's back in China again.
A great time to reconnect with customers and developers.
On Sunday, Tim Cook met with Ren Hongbin, chairman of the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade at the China Development Forum in Beijing. The main conversation, China's policy direction to boost consumption in 2025. Great news, obviously, for Apple.
And it has a significant knock-on effect in terms of employment because we manufacture here as well.
There are plenty of reasons why Cook pays so much attention to China, it being Apple's biggest overseas market for one. A day later, he visits the Ministry of Commerce.
You are also the old friend of Minister Cox.
And he met Minister Wang Wentao.
So today I appreciate this opportunity to have further in-depth and pragmatic conversation with you.
It's great to be among friends. As you know, we've been in China more than 30 years, and where there are companies that have been here longer than that, clearly, I don't think that any have produced as much of a win-win relationship.
Over the years, we've tracked Cook's visits as he attended expos and toured a new Apple store. But beyond his itinerary, his presence underscores China's role in the global market and industrial supply chain. Despite increasing global uncertainties, this remains a constant, a sentiment echoed by top executives at the CDF over the weekend.
We are in the auto industry. In the last 20 years, China has already developed a very mature and comprehensive supply chain and also industrial chain for the whole industry.
The resilience of the supply chain is critical for us. And as we look at suppliers from all around China, we can have the opportunity to pick from the best, source the best, have the highest quality products.
This could also explain why, despite tensions between China and the US, American companies formed the largest corporate presence at the CDF. On the same day as Cook's visit, the Commerce Minister also met with the CEO of Qualcomm, another key American player in the global tech industry.
Even though we have uncertain times, I'm very optimistic.
All of these are indications that for many, mutual benefit outweighs confrontation. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Beijing.
My colleague Guan Xin spoke with Pierre Gramegna, Managing Director of the European Stability Mechanism, an institution designed to safeguard Eurozone financial stability. They discussed ways for China and Europe to strengthen cooperation in stabilising the global economy amid rising uncertainties and trade tensions, as well as potential collaboration in green financing, including the developments of green bonds.
What is obvious is that China and the European Union are the two world champions of export. China is our first supplier with more than 20% of our imports, and we are the third customer for you here in China. So our trade relations are manifold and are very deep. And I think both Europe and China would like to have less protectionism instead of more. Now we are faced with increasing tariffs coming from the United States, which will reduce international trade or make it more difficult, will push prices up, increase inflation, which might again increase interest rates, and all this is not good for growth. So we are in the same boat there with China, and we also have the same philosophy in terms of multilateral trade. We rely on the World Trade Organization when there are issues. We negotiate and to reduce the trade tensions. So in my talks, obviously, this was discussed quite a lot, and there's lots of worries about that. But I think we are in the same boat.
China is prioritizing its green development. Do you foresee further cooperation between China and Europe in the realm of green financing or green bonds?
Europe is certainly the trendsetter and the leader in green bonds. I think of the European Investment Bank, for example, who was the first one to issue a green bond and is still the world champion in it. But I'm glad to see that the interest in China is increasing. Unfortunately, there are some areas in the world, and in particular the United States, where there is less interest recently for ESG bonds or green bonds. But I have to underline, look at the facts. Climate change is there to stay. We've had hottest years in history in the last 5-6 years. They were all the hottest years ever measured. We are not reaching the goals that we have set ourselves in the Paris Accord. So in the medium and long term, there's no escape. And I'm glad that Europe and China are continuing to make sure that finance will help green the economy, because we will not be able to achieve that without sustainable finance.
Still to come on Global Business. Troubled waters. A decades-old water-sharing treaty between the United States and Mexico becomes another point of contention. For the first time ever, the US has declined a request for water delivery.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
So many things from home and abroad.
We invite you to find focus. to focus on people's livelihoods.
Focus on producing and spending.
Focus on opening and sharing. And focus on an innovative and green path.
Don't lose focus to unveil a real, authentic China.
Get ready to biz focus.
Let us press on to the other big business headlines we are tracking for you at the moment. Oil prices extended gains for a fifth consecutive day on Tuesday as investor concerns grew over global supply following the US announcement of 25% tariffs on oil and gas imports from Venezuela. Meanwhile, OPEC Plus plans to increase oil production for the second straight month in May. German business sentiment improved in March, according to a Tuesday survey from the IFO Institute, marking growing optimism among companies anticipating recovery after 2 years of economic contraction there. The Business Climate Index rose to 86.7 as firms reported better current conditions and more positive outlooks. In the US, consumers are reducing spending due to high prices and economic uncertainty. Consumer finance company Synchrony Financial reported rising debt levels and increased delinquencies, indicating growing financial pressure, with major retailers also observing more cautious purchasing behaviour. Amid increasing political tensions, a water-sharing treaty between the US and Mexico is in the spotlight, threatening to leave entire cities high and dry. Alistair Baverstock has more from Mexico City.
The Tijuana River, running through a Mexican border city home to over 2 million people. The channel may be wide, but what little water flows here is sent mainly from the other side of the border, thanks to a treaty signed between Mexico and the US over 80 years ago. Under the 1944 Water Treaty, the US and Mexico share water from the Colorado and the Rio Grande rivers, and Tijuana depends on nearly 90% of water from the Colorado River.
The 1944 treaty established how water would be shared along the rivers that our countries share, with quotas set to be delivered from reservoirs along the Grande and Colorado rivers.
However, for the first time ever, the United States has declined a water request from Mexico, citing this country's own shortfalls in deliveries to farmers along the Texas border, leaving Tijuana high and dry. The decision has left the already struggling border city in a very dangerous position.
They're using the Texas issue as leverage, knowing that Tijuana's water problems are not agricultural but social. Certain regions of this city currently only have running water 1 day per week, so the threat of these restrictions is extremely worrying.
As the US threatens to cut off Tijuana's water supply, there is little Mexico can do about it.
If the US claims it's an issue of national security, they can easily stop the water. And if they do so, what can we do about it? Even the treaty exists, we are unprotected.
The impacts of this decision may now be catastrophic for this border city.
Investment here will decrease. Unemployment will rise. Houses will be left without water. Tijuana could be turned into a ghost town.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said last week that the water issue was being dealt with through an international boundary and water commission between the US and Mexico. Meantime, the worsening issue of water may soon impact the border region at the height of the dry season. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Mexico City.
Egypt has surged to second place in Africa's solar energy rankings, jumping 5 positions in 2024, according to data from the Global Solar Council. This significant rise is part of Egypt's accelerated efforts to invest in renewable energy, aiming to decrease its reliance on fossil fuels for electricity generation.
2024 has been a transformative year for renewables in Egypt as investments poured into the sector to add 707 megawatts from solar energy alone, making it the fastest growing in Africa.
Egypt has a huge potential, especially in solar and wind energy, with vast windy areas along the Suez Canal, as well as the sun shining throughout the year in the country, which makes it an attractive destination to produce clean energy.
Besides the Gulf Arab states, Chinese companies have been the largest investors in the sector, such as China Solar, which delivers solar panels and tech solutions.
Egypt is a very important country in this region, the Middle East Asia and North Africa, and with a huge population. This also means the great potential market, especially for the solar industry.
In spite of the potential, Africa still lags behind in renewable production. At $40 billion, the continent accounts for only 3% of global energy investments. One factor is that capital cost is 3 to 7 times higher than in developed countries. But investors here say Egypt has moved to fix these issues.
We don't have hurdles in importing components anymore. We are offered tariff breaks and discounts to reduce costs, as well as low interest rate loans to encourage more investments in the sector. There are a lot of offers to start manufacturing panels in Egypt as well.
According to Global Solar Council, South Africa and Egypt represent 78% of new energy installations in the whole continent in 2024. The North African country targets to produce 10 gigawatts of renewables in 2028, up from 6 gigawatts in 2024, and plans for clean energy production to account to 42% of total electricity production by 2030. And China is considered a focal point in these ambitious plans.
We depend on 80% of our renewable energy components on China, which makes China a major influence in our progress. Egypt is also aggressively tapping into the green hydrogen, and this is an opportunity for Chinese investors to work in green hydrogen in Egypt.
Finally, the inauguration of the long-awaited Dabaa nuclear power plant in 2030 will boost production to help achieve the country's clean energy goals. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo, Egypt.
That is all the global business we have for you for now. Thank you very much for your company. Remember, you can follow us right across your favourite social media platforms, Facebook, X, YouTube and more. You can also download the CGTN app. You can check us out on your favourite podcast platform. That is it from me for now. I'm Lincoln Humphreys in Beijing. You've been excellent company. We'll see you next time.
Hello and welcome to this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Greetings from the China Development Forum here at the Diaoyutai State Guest House in Western Beijing. Now, this year's event convenes over 700 government officials, corporate representatives, and thought leaders from around the world. On the sidelines of this year's event, we caught up with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, professor of Columbia University. We discussed his recent speech to the European Parliament, China-Europe and China-US relations, and of course, the future of the world order, given the disruptions coming from some corners of the world. Professor Sachs, thank you for doing this again and welcoming you back to our program on CGTN. Yeah, but let's begin with the Chinese economy. There are a lot of underreported facts about the Chinese economy. For example, China unilaterally gave visa-free treatment to much of the Western world. And it is making foreign investment easier in more sectors, and a series of stimulus measures to boost the Chinese domestic economy, knowing that it is a shortcoming in the past few months and years. Where do you think the Chinese economy is right now? Your assessment, please.
China is in a strong position. It's in a strong position because it is the low-cost producer of the cutting-edge technologies that the world most needs. It is the low-cost producer of AI, not only DeepSeek, but especially DeepSeek. It is the low-cost producer of electric vehicles, BYD. It is the low-cost producer of 5.5G, Huawei, and others. It is highly innovative. It's producing the green and digital technology of the future, and the rest of the world is seeing this and wants to be part of it. It wants to be part of it both in supply chains, in other words, having production in China. It wants to be part of it in the Chinese market. It wants to be part of it as a trade partner with China in the developing world so that those countries can achieve rapid economic development. If you're in Africa, or if you're in ASEAN, or if you're in West Asia, you say, my ticket to fast growth is green and digital technologies. Where can I find that? Well, with partnership with China. So this puts China in a strong position. Ironically, Donald Trump is strengthening the Chinese economy because American protectionism is not being well received around the world. It's being received with hostility and anger in the Western Hemisphere, in Canada, in Mexico, in Latin America. It's being received with very great annoyance in Europe. It's being received with great concern in Africa and in ASEAN, in Japan, in Korea. So countries are reassessing. If the United States is not a reliable partner, well, we need China as our reliable partner. So I think Donald Trump is actually a very self-defeating approach for the United States by being aggressive vis-a-vis the rest of the world. China says we're here, we're open, we're cooperative, come partner with us, and the world's hearing that.
And talking about Donald Trump's tariffs and other restrictions and embargoes towards Chinese trade investment and technology, there's an interesting data I want to share with you. With China's semiconductor self-sufficiency rates projected to reach 70% by the year 2030, and of course with the DeepSeek coming of age, and you use the word, defeating the purpose or self-defeating. How would you evaluate Donald Trump's policy so far vis-a-vis China, especially, of course, which is largely a continuation of Joe Biden's policy, which you called one of the worst, presidential policies towards China and its foreign partners?
In general, the idea of the United States that it would remain the lead country indisputably, or the unipolar country, by somehow containing China was nonsensical. But that was the approach adopted already back by Obama in 2015 and 2016. It was extended by Trump in his first term. It was then carried forward by Biden in his term. Now it is being carried forward once again by Trump in his second term. It doesn't make sense. if they would actually understand economics a little bit, they would understand that this is not going to work. It's not going to work geopolitically. The U.S. isn't going to isolate China. The U.S. might isolate itself the way that it's going, so it might create enemies all over the world of the United States because of this kind of aggressiveness that Trump is showing. And economically, it's not going to pull other parts of the world away from China. It probably will push other parts of the world towards China. It's just a mistake, in my opinion. But it's a mistake that I think is going to be with us for a while. Trump isn't going to change his mind because this is, first of all, a policy fairly widely subscribed to in the American political class. Second, Trump ideologically really is a protectionist, it seems. It's one of the few things that he's consistent on. It's a wrong policy in my approach, but he's consistently wrong on it, not intermittently wrong on it. So I don't think it's likely to reverse in the next few years. It's to the detriment of the United States, however.
Well, what would be Donald Trump's endgame vis-a-vis China? Because there seems to be some diverging forces at play within the Beltway and within Donald Trump's administration. Of course, Trump himself being someone who hates defeats, but the deep states, the Beltway policy elites and strategists want to bring China down, contain China, like you said, since the pivot to Asia policy back in the 2010s. Will that eventually lead to a showdown between the establishment with the deep state at its core versus Donald Trump, who may be pragmatic, who's showing some level of flexibility and pragmatism to start with, eventually, merging his interests or abandoning to the deep state to some extent? I think it is probably true, though nobody really can say for sure, that there are two different strands of Trump's thinking. One strand is about protectionism as an economic strategy. He seems to believe in that. I think that's likely to continue. At the same time, there is a kind of view of Trump that the U.S. is one of a few great powers and better that we don't go to war with each other. This is the positive side that Trump gives some inkling of, for example, in his dealings with Vladimir Putin and Russia. The U.S. deep state has been deeply anti-Russian, but Trump is not. Trump is more divide the world. Russia, you take your part, we'll take our part. Trump's aggression seems to be more manifested in the Western Hemisphere. Trump really would like Canada because he wants that Arctic coast and he wants Canada's resources. Of course, I think it's a crazy idea, but he seems serious about it. He wants Greenland, he wants Panama. So he doesn't care too much about Ukraine, which is fine, because when America cared, quote, too much about Ukraine, it got Ukraine into a war. Maybe Trump won't care too much about Taiwan. That would be safe for Taiwan and good for U.S.-China relations. We don't know what the policy will be right now. My own advice is stop sending armaments to Taiwan. Maybe Trump would come around to that view the same way he came around to the view of not sending armaments to Ukraine. We don't know yet. Well, on a skiing slope, you got a call with Jake Sullivan, according to your own testimony to the European Parliament, a speech to the European Parliament, rather, advising him about what Joe Biden should and shouldn't do vis-a-vis Russia. Of course, they didn't listen to you. And if you had the chance to call someone within the Trump administration, be it the National Security Advisor or J.D. Vance or someone close to Trump and his thought process, what would you advise him, when it comes to his policy vis-a-vis China? What is the right thing to do at this point? Again, my own view is that the world is not a zero-sum world, so the whole idea of who's on top is the wrong approach to begin with. Open relations are a win-win
proposition for the United States and for China, for Russia. I don't see any reason for conflict among the major powers. As a practical matter, the two things I would advise most simply are not to go protectionist, because this will harm the U.S. economy and U.S. society. It will isolate the U.S. from the rest of the world, not strengthen the U.S. And I would strongly suggest that the U.S. stop sending armaments to Taiwan, period, because I don't want Taiwan caught in a proxy war. I don't want politicians in some mistaken way to think, oh, the U.S. will protect us. I told the Ukrainians over and over again, do not think the U.S. will protect you. The U.S. will get you into a lot of trouble. And I would say the same thing to Taiwan politicians also. To keep Taiwan safe, deal with Beijing. Go to negotiation. Do not expect the U.S. to save you or to help you or to make you more secure. And sending armaments from the United States to Taiwan is simply a provocation. It's not a means to safety. It's a means that would raise danger for everybody involved. So that's what I'm hoping the United States would do. They don't listen to me all that often, but anyway, that's my advice.
You also said that during that European Parliament speech, China is not an enemy. China is just a success story. That is why it is the enemy of the United States, because it's a bigger economy than that of the United States. And we thought that was brilliant.
China has a key characteristic. It's got 1.4 billion people. The United States has 335 million people. China is therefore roughly 4 times the population. China is not going to remain below 1/4 of the U.S. size per person. Therefore, it's going to be a bigger economy. This is arithmetic. This is the logic of China's success. So the United States has to get used to the fact that China has a bigger economy already, far bigger when measured at purchasing power prices, and it will be a bigger economy measured at market prices and exchange rates. That's because there are 1.4 billion people. In per capita terms, the United States is still ahead and will be for some time, in fact. China is not a threat. China is not a danger. The world is not a zero-sum struggle. And trade with the U.S. and China during the past 40 years, and especially since the 1990s, has been mutually beneficial. China's rise has helped the United States to advance. The U.S. has helped China to advance. This has been mutually beneficial. In trade, when certain sectors or places do get hurt by trade, and that happens, then they should be helped by regional policy or by redistributional policy, by social support. This is how a normal economy behaves. You don't stop the benefits of trade because some small parts of the economy suffer relative to others. You rather help those parts to make sure that the benefits are widely shared. I can say in a different context in China, when China opened up the economy, it was the eastern part of the country on the coastal areas that benefited the most. And the Chinese leader said the Western China development is lagging behind the Eastern China development. So they created very creative ways to promote Western China development so that the benefits of development would also be shared in Central and Western China. That was a regional development policy that has been quite successful. The United States doesn't have such a policy. So if our industrial Midwest lagged behind, we don't have an industrial policy to say we need a Midwest development program. If we were as clever as China in its management of such issues, we would be much less protectionist. Trump is appealing to protectionism for particular parts of the American economy, neglecting the fact that the overall U.S. economy is a big beneficiary of U.S.-China open trade.
Professor Sachs, talking about America's grand strategy, game theory is taught widely across American classrooms. The game theory that you think is not originating or derived from practical analyses, logical analysis, but rather very often coming from presumptions, presuming that your enemies or your rivals would act in a certain way, treating them as a black box, lacking of empathy and sympathy towards how they would think, and internally the dynamics over there. You said America's game theory is not a negotiation theory, it's not a peacemaking theory, but a unilateral theory and a non-cooperative theory. And can you elaborate on that?
When American policymakers say, what should we do with China? They think they know what China's going to do. They think China's going to do some particular thing no matter whether there are negotiations or not. So they say, no reason to negotiate. Our policy should be the following. And this is a huge mistake. Even in everything we know about actual game theory, we know that if the two sides in a strategic relationship don't communicate, they're much more likely to end up in a bad situation than if they do communicate. So the biggest problem, in my view, is we don't have appropriate, mutually respectful communications between the United States and Russia, the United States and China, and the presumption that Americans in Washington have about the outside world is very narrow, not well informed, not based on personal experience, not based on negotiation. It's either very arrogant, we know and we're going to do it, or very defensive, China's out to conquer the world, or some silly idea. But if they talked to their counterparts, understood, spent time in diplomacy, spent time in visiting other countries, we'd have a much safer world.
Yeah, I can't remember last time Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio visited China, for that matter. Talking about Europe, you said that the European foreign policy should not be one that is, a Russia-phobic European foreign policy, right? That should be the hallmark, everything that Europe embraces. And in that light, what do you think should be Europe's China policy?
Well, of course, Europe and China
especially
are
at this point.
naturally cooperative countries. First, they share the two ends of Eurasia, and that means that there is an absolute complementarity. China has a Belt and Road Initiative. Europe has had, but it doesn't implement properly, something they call the Global Gateway. They're both connectivity initiatives. If China and Europe said, wow, we each have a connectivity initiative, the Global Gateway should invest towards the east, and the Belt and Road should invest towards the west, and we'll meet, I say, in Samarkand, for example, in Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, in the South Caucasus. We'll make corridors across Eurasia. This would be so beneficial for both sides. It would be so beneficial for the energy transformation, for the digital transformation, for tourism, for culture, for all good things. You know, Marco Polo took so many years to reach China. Now we can reach China instantaneously on 5.5G. We can reach China within the day, obviously, in air travel. We should be so interconnected with mutual benefit, and that is the natural position for Europe and China. And interestingly, maybe Donald Trump, in his inadvertent way, will help bring this about, because during the Biden period, which I regarded as a very failed administration, Biden was saying the Western world must defend against China. And Europe was in the tendency to go with the US. Now, with Trump, Europe is not in the tendency to go with the US. They see the US as weird, unstable. So ironically, Trump could help to bring Europe and China together.
Yeah, you talk about European strategic autonomy, beginning in earnest and for real this time around, instead of having this division.
Europe is not a unified continent. It was at war within Europe for basically 1,000 years. Now the European Union is trying to be a peaceful unity, but it's a very weak unity so far. It is peaceful, but there's no foreign policy. There's no strategic policy. Up until now, Europe, 27 separate countries have relied on the United States to give the coherence. My argument is no. The U.S. can't give Europe the coherence. Europe needs its own coherence. That means a stronger European Union. That's a little bit tricky because many in Europe say, oh, the European Union, it's a failure. Why should it be stronger? We need weaker even. But I say, no, it's a failure. It should be improved. It should be fixed. If Europe is going to deal with China, it's good if Europe is more unified. If Europe is going to deal with Russia, it's good if Europe is more unified. If Europe is going to deal with the United States, Europe needs to be unified. Europe is threatened by the United States, by the way, directly threatened. Donald Trump is talking about taking Greenland. That's part of Denmark. Now, seriously.
A NATO country.
Seriously, that's not an idle statement. That is a real security threat from the United States. Europe should respond as Europe. They're not capable of that yet. So this is part of what I mean by strategic autonomy is not only a change of mindset, but also a change of institutions so that there's a real European Union, not only a very, very weak European Union.
And Professor, you said Europe is not NATO. It shouldn't be. And you even called for a dissolution of NATO, which should have happened, you said, in the early 1990s.
Yes.
Well, it's unlikely to happen given the constraints realities, as some would say, but you think that could be a choice, a thought for some of them, more liberal thinkers and policymakers to entertain themselves with?
I think that there's a real chance, depending on how U.S. policy evolves under the Trump administration, that NATO will actually end within the next 10 years. Whether the United States under Trump says we continue to honor Article 5, which is the mutual defense part of NATO, is an open question, actually. It's pretty clear that Europe is moving towards more military autonomy and security autonomy. I want Europe to do it not in preparation for war. That's suicide. I want them to do it for peace and deterrence. So I don't want Europe to just build a military to prepare for war with Russia. That would be insane. I want Europe to have its own strategic autonomy and not to depend on the United States. I think that this is actually possible. The first steps are being taken right now.
Which is?
Well, the first steps are expanding the military component of Europe, added budget, and interestingly, and I think correctly in my view, the Europeans are saying when we build up our military equipment, it will be European-built systems, because that does actually three things. One, it's a boost for the economy in straightforward demand terms. Europe needs that, actually. Second, if you only buy U.S. equipment, the U.S. can turn it on and off. You're still pretty dependent on whether those systems are going to work, how they're going to be maintained. You're still under the U.S. control. And third, it's actually the case, strangely enough, that investments in the military actually have a lot of technology spillovers for the whole economy. I don't champion that as the way to get those spillovers, but that will accelerate the European capacities.
You said AI must serve humanity, not replace it, and you said there's a real danger where AI is, helping centralize powers to the corporate elites, to the policy maker. Can you elaborate on that?
AI is clearly a very powerful technology, and it can improve human well-being across every part of our lives. Every part of the economy can be benefited by AI. But we know there are real risks as well. Non-stop surveillance, concentration of power among a few private companies, militarization of AI, autonomous weapon systems, even the potential fears that AI-driven systems escape human control, for example, on the battlefield, and actually provoke war or escalation or something quite disastrous. All of the bad side becomes possible as well. This is something true about technology pretty much from the human discovery of fire onward, which is that there's a good side to it and there's a dangerous side to it.
And what do you think of the hostility displayed by the Trump administration towards DeepSeek, banning the government officials from using it right now, which could extend to all sectors of the U.S. society potentially?
We have a lot of companies very close into the Trump administration that are getting mega contracts from the CIA, from the Pentagon, from the National Security Agency, and from others that are creating a strong symbiosis of the security state and Silicon Valley. This is quite unhealthy, quite dangerous, also rather obscure from the public point of view. It's happening very quickly. It's happening below the surface. People don't know. Congress barely exists anymore. This is a one-person show in the United States at this point. So we don't really know what Mr. Musk and his friends are doing exactly in this area, but we have a good sense that a lot of potentially dangerous developments are taking shape quite quickly.
Professor Sachs, thank you so much.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Meng Guan at the Diaoyutai State Guest House in Beijing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you again soon.